Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to take a look at this post here over on Reddit by one of the members of the company Stardock. They gave 10 tips on something you should probably care about if you're looking at releasing a game on Steam and things to think about in regards to your wishlist numbers. I think it's actually a really interesting article. So I figured we could go through this today and have a look at what the advice is and whether or not it's any good. So let's go ahead and take a look at the article and see if we agree with each item. So we kick off with a bit of an introduction here. Over the past several years, we've released a number of titles ranging from Sins of a Solar Empire 2 to Offworld Trading Company. More recently, we were asked by Microsoft to take over the production management of Ara History Untold, a Civ-style 4X game. So they've done a lot. It's very much in the sort of genre that I like to make games in. So they've got experience. I'm a big fan of a lot of Stardock's games. So they know what they're talking about. And so in all these cases, wish lists are not just predictive of how well the game is going to do on release, but they are a strong signal as to whether a given promotional strategy is working. I think this is a really interesting comment because a lot of people will just use wishlist numbers as a way to know if their game is going to succeed or not. But I really like pinpointing on the focus of your wishlist numbers are also reflective of your promotional strategy. So it's not just the fact that your game might not actually be any good, but the way in which you're marketing your game might be problematic to why your wishlist numbers aren't as high as they potentially could be. You might have an excellent game that you're just marketing poorly and therefore your wishlist numbers are lower. So I think that's a really interesting place to start in this post. I've run into numerous seasoned professionals in our industry who wouldn't accept that a low wishlist count indicated trouble ahead. I think that's a great comment. So I've put together this article here on my experiences. You can expect about 50% of day one wishlist count to reflect your first month's sales. That doesn't mean 50% of your wishlist will convert. It just helps indicate how interest of your game correlates with wishlist counts. And that's a really good point. A lot of people do talk about this wishlist conversion and how they expect half of their wishlist to convert, and then when they don't, they're upset. But it's more about visibility and the way that the Steam algorithm works. And so I think this is a really excellent place to start in giving some advice. Most of the people I've spoken to agree with this. It's probably actually lower than 50%, I think. I would be a bit more conservative with that estimate and say about 30% probably, maybe closer to 20% now. It kind of depends what genre you're in, but I think this is a pretty accurate sentiment that day one will probably be half at least, probably half at most actually of your Steam audience. So this second one, I love this. Show gameplay. I've watched big studios flush millions of dollars into trailers that showed no gameplay. You don't need to show gameplay necessarily in a teaser. Lots of times the visuals aren't ready to show yet, but it helps a lot. I fully agree with this. I think this is really good advice. The amount of trailers I've seen that spend so much time building a bunch of nonsense out before just showing the game. I think you can do certain things in teasing the game and showing the game off without necessarily showing gameplay. But I think more broadly, it just means show footage from your video game that set the tone of your game in a way that is, I think, accurate to the reflection of what your game is. Often that means actually showing gameplay because certain games need to do that in order to show what the game is. But depending on the theme and mood and objective of the player, then that should be dictating the sort of trailer that you're making. But generally, I will agree with this sentiment that gameplay is king because ultimately players are going to decide whether they want to play your game based on seeing the gameplay and how it plays and what in their head they think it's going to play like. Build a community. If you have forums, use them. Discord, good. Reddit, great. You need to get that network effect. I like this comment. I don't necessarily think it's as important as some of the other comments in this post, but it doesn't hurt, right? If you have a group of people that are ready and active to go, you're going to get that boost from the beginning when you launch your game. You know, generally one of the reasons that I think a lot of people make YouTube videos about their games or they make content elsewhere, they'll have an audience ready to go to activate and send towards the game that they're making. Generally, I think it's a good idea, and having something else and a little community behind you is going to be beneficial to your game. Don't let denial get you. I warned a partner that they'd likely only sell N units in their first month because of their wish lists were X, and they just couldn't accept it. That's decent advice, I think. Generally, being skeptical, I think, is going to get you a little bit further. You might also work a little bit harder on making sure that your skepticism is justified. And if anything, better, I think, to be overly skeptical and yield a higher result than overly optimistic and end up disappointed because perhaps you made yourself delusional. There's a lot of nuance in that, I think, but generally, I definitely see a lot of posts, especially on the game dev Reddit and on the Unity subreddit and things like that of people not really understanding why their game didn't launch very well. And 2/3 of the time they have just some crappy art and their Steam capsule, the trailer is rubbish, and nobody knows that this game exists because it looks like baby's first game that they're trying to sell for $30 or $40. So generally, I think be realistic about your goals and the kind of game that you're making, and especially your price point. Trust your fans. We just announced a remaster with Elemental Reforged. This is a fairly niche fantasy strategy game title from 15 years ago. We've been really clear that wishlists translate to scope. We got about 7,000 wishlists on the first day. That's excellent, which we were pretty happy with given the age and nicheness of the title. Yeah, I think that's a great amount of wishlist numbers to have when you're working on a title that kind of is only going to appeal to a few people. So your fans can be extremely helpful with word of mouth. Yeah, I mean, if you are going to make a specific game for a specific genre, you can really pinpoint, and I think the next comment here goes into this in a little bit more detail, but especially if this is your second or third game, you're going to be bringing over fans from your games anyway, so people might be a fan of the work that you do. This also, I guess, leans into that build a community comment. Generally, some people will just follow things for the things that you are doing because they like you and your work. And so leaning into that can be really beneficial. But also if you have a game that you've made in the past that you are remastering, trusting those numbers and really leaning towards those people is probably a great place to start, and then finding a more broader audience a little bit later. So that's again a little bit blended with what comes next, which is number 6 here. Specialists are greater than generalists when it comes to coverage. It's still a great thing to get covered by, say, IGN or PC Gamer, but in specialist sites and forums and influencers will translate directly into far more activity. Yeah, so this is kind of one of those standard marketing things where you want to find your niche audience, because if you're generally advertising broadly, the marketing spend or views are lower quality, right? So it's way better to have 10,000 people look at your product and have, let's say, a 20-30% click-through rate or purchase rate, whatever you want to say, like follow through from those people, than it is to have, 100,000, 200,000 and less than 1% carry through and finally make that purchase. Because impressions aren't as important for us for games. It's much more about the actual follow through, especially if you want to make money. You want to be selling it to the right people and putting it in front of the right people. So getting specialist journalists to cover the game, specialist streamers, specialist YouTubers, they're going to be much broader because the people that are interested in that are going to find them first and then find you. Okay, the next point, you've got 5 seconds. Whether it be a screenshot or a video, you get about 5 seconds to make your case, which will buy you another 30 seconds of attention. Will buy you another 30 seconds of attention if your game has stood out. I think that's what that means. The number of it's like RimWorld, but with slightly different graphics, ads, and pictures I see makes me sad. This one is interesting because it also irritates me. There are a lot of people that post on their Steam capsule, like the short description, it's X meets Y, and they're using other games to sell their game. And I generally don't like that. I think if you have to compare yourself to a previous game in order to get people interested in you, I think you're doing something wrong. I think other people should make those comments to you, but you shouldn't really use that in your marketing material. I think it just feels unprofessional. It feels a little bit like you have an identity crisis. You don't trust your game well enough to stand out, that you have to say, hey, if you like this thing and you like this thing, then you'll like me. So I would also advise against that kind of thing. And yeah, use the strongest parts of your game to stand out and try to show the thing that's unique about you and why people should care about you, not why it's just another thing that they've already seen and you're just doing that a different way, unless again that's a unique selling point for your game, maybe. But try not to lean on things of the past. People will get that by the mechanics and the style and all these things. They'll understand that from the beginning. You don't need to tell them that. Your audience is smart. Show the things that make you stand out. Show the things that make people excited about your game. And generally the 5 seconds approach is something you should think about, especially when it comes to like a trailer or a pitch or your text. Put the key moments, the key beats, grab attention at the start, why people should be excited, and then keep them. So whether that's a screenshot or a video, you've got to just keep grabbing their attention. I think this is really good advice. And yeah, it's like X, but just looks different or is a different style is not enough to sell your game. People will see this segment without you needing to tell them. Don't be too clever. Short, to the point, and obvious will beat subtle and clever most of the time. Fully agree. Be overt about what's happening and keep it short and sweet. Don't be long rambly. Don't try and tell this long-winded story to try and get people's attention and get them invested because they need to know everything before they get it. Find the crux of your game and make that the selling point, you know? Maybe we can look into that at some point in the future. Let me know down in the comments if you want to see something like that, where we go and review some Steam pages, and I can maybe talk about what I think is really strong and what is really weak in certain places. Perhaps even feel free to send me some and we can have a look at them. So this 9th one, love this. Visuals is greater than gameplay for Wishlist. This is something we at stardock struggle with. We're very engineering centric and our games have struggled to look decent. A pretty game with bad gameplay will ultimately fail, but an ugly game with amazing gameplay will generally lose out. But ugly doesn't mean crude graphics. A distinct look can be very intriguing. Yeah, this one is really interesting because I think visuals will grab attention, and in an attention economy, smart, cool looking visuals are going to take more attention away from other games. You know, we have language in making video games about the juice and it feeling and looking cool. So you kind of have to do the same thing with your marketing. And yeah, it's really hard with an in-depth strategical management type games. It's quite difficult to do that well and convey depth of your game while also making it look good, because those two things are sometimes quite in conflict with each other. So if we look at Crusader Kings, it's absolutely gorgeous. This is the user interface is gorgeous. It's clearly in depth and overwhelming, but it looks good. It looks like a video game. There's clearly a lot going on, but it's very consistent. It's very appealing. And while it might not stand out as well as some other games, if we go look at Crusader Kings 2, it's not as nice. And obviously it's an older game, I understand that, but it's just much more noisy and much more confusing to me. This looks like a lot of the colors are clashing. There's so much going on. I mean, you can barely see the UI against this background. So even as a screenshot, this is, in my opinion, a bad screenshot to pick. It's very messy and it doesn't read as well as the sequel does. Crusader Kings 3 just is visually more coherent, and that makes such a big difference. So even subtle things like that make a big difference to your Steam page, but it's always going to be a struggle with management games to make them look as appealing as everything else on the Steam store. But I think there are tips and tricks that you can use to make your game look as appealing as possible. Generally, I think this point is also leaning into visuals for videos and things like that. And I think there's a lot of things you could then do if you are showing video of your game as to how that could potentially look. It's difficult because it's very heavy genre. Some genres will have a better time showing off their visuals than others, and some games will have a harder time displaying their depth without making the visuals look simplistic or too sort of mobile game-like. So that's a difficult point to hit, and clearly they've mentioned that too, but it is something I think is worth keeping in mind for sure. Now, this 10th one is one that I really stand by. I think this is something that is leading me as a designer all the way through every game that I'm going to make from this point forward. Art direction is greater than graphics quality. I think that should be number one on this list for sort of getting attention. Many a game has had some really high quality art assets, but without good art direction, it will not do well. Don't think that they're the same thing. That is a really key point. Do not think that they're the same thing. You might be able to go on the marketplace and grab all these high quality HDR, super high poly assets and make your game look visually gorgeous and it run like 12 frames per second because you're rendering ray tracing and everything. But that game, if it is inconsistent, you know, if you've got this pot from this store user that's got a certain art style to it and this door that's a completely different art style or, you know, time and place, and the whole thing just is not visually coherent, your game is going to suffer for it. So having a consistent, specific art direction, whether that's cheap but by intention, you make a low poly game that you're designing in Blender because you can make low poly really easily versus a high poly, high fidelity game that's going to be expensive to build. That's a conscious choice that you should make. And I think lean into art direction, lean into a cheaper art style where the art direction is consistent rather than a high fidelity, graphically gorgeous game that's using the highest end of tech. Save that for the AAA industry. They're there to burn dollars and waste time on all that kind of stuff. I think as an indie, you want to be making what you are capable of making and making it look consistent. There are a ton of games with solid art direction that I don't necessarily think look that good, but it's consistent and it fits the style of their game and they sell well. Anyway, I hope this helps. Our industry is seeing a lot of turmoil, and being in the front row and watching it, a lot of the denial of the sales of various titles was a major factor. Major publishers and studios simply could not accept that their game did not have the interest that they expected because they were still used to their game only having to compete with the other 15 SKUs at GameStop rather than every game ever made in the age of digital distribution. yeah, I do think we've seen a lot of publishers get something of a wake-up call recently. You know, they're trying to just make the same old game, but competing in the same market and just not really doing anything new or interesting, and being surprised that they fail, you know, shock Pikachu face. So overall, I think this I don't know if you call a Reddit post article, but I think this post has a lot of useful and valuable advice. I really do think the art direction graphics quality one is one of the key things that will make your game stand out, and a few of these are stronger than others maybe, and I probably wouldn't give all of these as pieces of advice, but definitely a few of them. It looks like a lot of people tend to agree that the last few points are the strongest ones. We have this comment here: points 9 and 10 are lessons badly in need of learning by a lot of generally solo or small teams. Devs who don't do great with the art side of things, especially with 2D, often they seem to not be able to tell the difference between simple and a particular style and bad. They'll simply point out that XYZ successful games also have bad graphics like their game, and it's like, oh honey, no. Simple, competent, consistent, well considered with a unified color palette, aka that all important point 10 thing of art direction, is not the same as just plain awful. I think that's a really strong point. Even if it's in a style you don't vibe with, I think sometimes it's a more detail / higher poly is better kind of brain rot, which I've already said. So it's interesting to see people here agree. People will argue that Vampire Survivors is bad, ugly visually. Maybe. I mean, it's consistent, and it's like, sure, you might not like the style. I'm not a particular fan of it either, but it knows what it is and it's competently done. Fully agree with that. I've seen people say similar things for Lethal Company, and it's like, it's not AAA realistic. It has no need to be, but it's well done with a lot of character and comedy inherent to the chosen visual approach. Being prettier would arguably make that game worse. I don't know if I'd agree with that bit, but yeah, definitely the consistency is really a standout point. So I'm not sure how much is people being literally unable to see it, not thinking about it in an active enough manner to see it, or what. I know it's not something that comes naturally to everyone and can be a struggle that's understandable. Design sense can seem like one of those innate and mysterious things that if someone doesn't have it, it's hard to cultivate. But too often solo indie dev types give off the vibe of I struggle with it, therefore it's unimportant when it comes to visuals. I struggle with it, therefore it's unimportant. I think that's quite a lot of what drives failure, is not really learning the things you struggle with well enough to know whether they are important or not. But yeah, it looks like a lot of the comments here are sharing the same sentiment. Extremely valuable information. Thanks. Always great to see posts from successful devs on here. I'd build on point 10. It's not only about art direction quality, but also matching expectations. Our game has a bit of a cartoon anime style art direction, and we've received some positive and very negative responses due to that. Yeah, matching expectation is really important there too, and that could come with the genre. You know, if you have a happy-go-lucky looking art style in a horror game, if you're not subverting that art style somewhat, probably a little bit weird. Yeah, that's also an important thing to pay attention to. So yeah, generally, I think there's some really good advice in this post. I'll leave a link to it down below so you can read through it yourself and take a look at what some of the other comments have said. Generally, I would agree. Like, there are things that you really need to be paying attention to if you're trying to make your game succeed, and a lot of these comments are things that you should be paying attention to. So this has hopefully helped you maybe consider some of those things if you haven't already been considering those. If you have any thoughts of your own or anything you'd like to also suggest, then be sure to leave a comment down below too. And if you're new to the channel and you'd like to see more videos like this and more commentaries like this, then let me know by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. But otherwise, thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see you again next time. Bye.